Hi, my name is Stephan Wiedner. I'm the CEO of Noomii.com, and we are all about unleashing the collective potential of individuals, teams, and organizations so that we can solve the biggest problems in this world. Today, I'm excited to have as my special guest, Jathan Janove. Jathan, welcome.
Thank you.
And what we're going to be talking today is about toxic leadership and specifically your background, Jathan, having been a lawyer, and now you're working with a lot of the same individuals, I would say, that maybe we can characterize them as toxic, but I would say they're all strong-willed, super intelligent, and guess what? Sometimes they're abrasive. And these are the types of people you work with. I think your skill set is really unique. I've probably talked to 1,000 coaches. We've worked with hundreds of coaches over the years, and you bring a very unique angle, a very unique perspective to this specific challenge. And for those who are listening here today, you likely have a toxic leader in your organization. You're probably wondering, how do I deal with this? Well, this is an individual who will be able to speak to that. So first of all, Jathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into doing this work?
Okay, yes, sure. Well, I'll start with my former career. For 25 years, I was a labor and employment law attorney. And most of that time, I represented employers. During that period, I encountered numerous and dealt with numerous incidents of harassment, sexual harassment, racial harassment, bullying, even violence, threats of violence, all sorts of misbehavior in the workplace. And so I litigated these cases, I tried these cases. I also did a lot of advising of employers on how to deal with it. I conducted high-end investigations, I taught investigations, and so I had a whole bunch of intersections with toxic relationships, toxic workplaces, toxic behavior.
And now you're no longer a lawyer. You're not a practicing lawyer. So you do not give any legal advice, but you do coaching. So how did you get into that?
Yes, I'm proud to say I'm a recovering lawyer. And so, well, what happened was over time, I felt that all I was doing was treating symptoms, not causes. And because, okay, there would be a specific problem with a specific individual or individuals, and I'd come in, some kind of intervention, but nothing meaningful changed. Maybe the immediate problem was solved, but the underlying causes in it, the problematic leadership in the organization, the overall unhealthiness of the culture, the unwillingness to really do the kind of interventions that can turn a problem bully person into a good person. That kind of investment wasn't being made. And so as a result, I'd get a call again, and 2 years later, a year later, here's another problem. And so I really wanted to shift to, how do you create a healthy culture? How do you intervene in a way that you could have a lasting solution as opposed to just putting out an immediate fire? And so that took me into the world of organization development consulting and executive coaching.
And from that, you have this underlying belief that, or you must have, that people can change, that behavior change is possible for perhaps even the most abrasive leaders. I'm assuming that's true, right? You believe that to be true.
I would say it's more than a belief. I would say empirically, from my experience, I know it's true. I'm not going to say it's always true, but I know for a fact that there are people who are perceived as bullies, as bigots, as harassers, as sexists, as fill in the blank, that had a behavioral conversion that stuck. I can also tell you there's plenty of counterexamples to that. But I know for a fact that of this class of problematic people, there's a subclass of that is with the right approach and the right timing and the right this and that can change, and not just change to sort of wait till it's quiet. Wait till the police go away and then I can go back and misbehave. I mean, change in a fundamental way. I've just experienced it too many times to say it's not a belief for me. It's a fact for me.
So what do you think are the key ingredients then for making that behavior change in the first place, and then secondly, making it stick? Like what's the formula there?
Well, my typical advice for an employer that's in that situation with somebody who's a toxic leader who otherwise brings value. Okay. So first things first. Okay. There's a toxic leader. Is he otherwise a good leader? I mean, should he be there anyway? Sometimes the answer is no, they shouldn't. Then it's simple. Fire him. Okay. But let's say the client or the employer says, this person's our top salesperson, or this person has great contacts. This person treats our customers like gold. It's the employees he's abusive to, or whatever it is. So the employer would like to try an intervention short of termination. Okay, so that's the first thing. So then, but what I say in that case is you've got to be very clear. And what you need to tell that leader is, we're at a crossroads. There's two paths, okay? There's no third path because the status quo isn't going to continue. So path one is we say, this isn't the place for you. There's not a fit with our cultural values and our behavioral expectations. You need to move on. Or we try an intervention that's with the goal of creating lasting, sustained, meaningful change as perceived by others. And then that leader makes the decision. Which path do you choose? The key thing, though, for the employer is don't slide into the third one, which is the sloppy, toxic status quo. Don't let the person off the hook. It's an either or. There's no other alternatives, either or. And that at least creates an opportunity for me as a prospective coach to have a candid conversation with that leader. And potentially to have the leverage where meaningful change could occur.
So that's the starting point. Now, you said this needs to be communicated. Who needs to communicate that to the leader? Do you think that needs to be the organization, or is that your job?
The organization.
And who in the organization, ideally?
Well, it'd be the CEO, or if the CEO is the problem, it'd be the chairman of the board or the owner.
So what I'm hearing, it's someone with authority. So it can't be a colleague, probably not the HR manager, unless they're the direct supervisor of this individual.
Yeah. There needs to be leverage. Okay. Without leverage, in rare instances, I've been able to work an intervention with, where I didn't have the leverage, where essentially the client, the employer, the organization said, Jathan, if this person leaves, we fold our tent. Okay. This is, unfortunately, this jerk is necessary to our survival. Okay. And we're not ready to pull the plug on our entire organization. Can't afford it. Maybe we can build to that point, and at some point be able to grow out of where we can get rid of the jerk. But for now, everybody loses in the organization. So in those cases, then my only shot, okay, because I don't have leverage now, my only shot is to have a conversation with that person and say, what bugs you about people? What bugs you about the employees that, of course, complained about this person? And sometimes what will happen is that toxic leader will describe frustrations, disappointments, people letting him down or letting her down or frustrating them, getting in the way of their goals, preventing them, because a lot of these people are driven and they're result oriented. And so if we can get a dialogue going, then I can sometimes say, well, what if you worked with me, tried some new things outside your comfort zone, and you got more of what you wanted? Okay. What if? And then if that continues, you say, well, how about we try an experiment? Now, let's be clear. For the time period of this experiment, you're going to have to make some radical changes in your behavior. But we will closely study the results. We'll measure the results. And if you're not getting those results, then you tell me to take a hike. And you go back to the way you've been, and that's made you, in your mind, the success that you are. So all we're going to do is do an experiment. Okay. Now, that is something I use even in the first category, which is where I have leverage. So in other words, they've been sent to me as the principal's office, right? Okay. They got to work with me because they want to keep their job. All right. They don't want to lose their stock options. All right, fine. I still give them that talk and say, you know what? If this is successful, guess what? You're not just going to keep your job. You're going to have one of those amazing moments. And by the way, say you have family, spouse, kids, whatever. I'll make a bet with you. If this is successful in the workplace, you're going to be reporting some real positive results at home. And if you're involved in your church or whatever it is, you're going to see it there too. If it works. So my preference is always to have that leverage because it makes that conversation a lot easier. But if the client says, can't do it, not now, I'm willing to go in. But if the person then blows me off and says, the hell with you, then it's like, okay, client's got to make a decision. So that's why I come back to people that other people tend to think are incorrigible, often aren't, because that misbehavior is a function of something need that isn't being met. And if we can get to that need or that need behind the need, we got a shot, we got a chance.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing, Jathan, is first of all, what works is giving them the two paths, right? You got path A, path B, you choose. So in a way, you've got the leverage, which might feel like an ultimatum, but it's also giving them the choice, correct?
Absolutely.
And then secondly, you're presenting it as an experiment to try new behavior to get ultimately what they want. So it needs to be in their best interest. So this isn't, hey, you're not looking out for the organization. You're not looking out for the people that represent that organization. You're representing them. You're saying, look, this could be better for you, because if you're complaining about these people in these certain ways, there's something we can do about that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that would make your life better, wouldn't it?
Right.
So, okay, that's really, really good. And I think that's one of the challenges. What we see with clients is they haven't had that conversation with that leader. There's conversations happening behind that leader. They're plotting strategies and trying to figure out how do we handle the behaviors that we're seeing. And they never are very apprehensive to have that conversation around, you know what, there are two paths that you're going to take. By the way, the third path of status quo ain't an option.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid to make that declaration. And I think part of it is for fear of losing that person or for fear of making it sound like an ultimatum. But what I'm hearing from you is you need to give them that ultimatum, but present it as a choice. You have choice A or B. You choose.
Yes. It's always presented as a choice.
Now, I think there's another truism about why this work works, like why you've been successful as an executive coach. And it's certain qualities of these leaders. You mentioned that they're driven, they're motivated. That works in your favor, true?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. You find their pain point, which is some human being is getting in the way of their goals because they're not smart enough, or they're not wise enough, or they're not working hard enough, or they're not dependable enough, or they're not this enough or that enough. And I refer to it as the mama Grizzly factor. Okay. You're out for that little nature hike in the woods and encounter these adorable bear cubs, but you're not enjoying it, right? Because what's going on in your head? Where's mama? And if mama sees you in the vicinity of those cubs, mama has a basic, simplistic recognition. When in doubt, in fact, not even in doubt, treat it as a threat and remove it. And that's often a lot of your bullies and your toxic behaviors are rooted in a kind of mama grizzly. You're threatening my bear cubs. Whether they are or not, you're threatening my cubs, whap. And so if I can get the discussion about what we can do to help the cubs grow and thrive and do better, okay, and how these people can contribute to that desirable outcome, then we have a chance. We have a shot. We have a shot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think there's an inherent competitiveness too, right, among leaders to want to achieve, if presented, a plan that makes sense and is agreeable to them.
Yes, and that's actually one of the beauties of the Marshall Goldsmith mini survey. Okay, for those of you who may not know, but in a Marshall Goldsmith, which is what I use, system.
Marshall it's a stakeholder-centered approach. So yeah, go on, carry on.
Go ahead.
Explain it.
Stephanie, you want to give a little background, but anyway, the point about it is there are stakeholders, often the person's direct reports and others, and at the end of a certain period of time, they're going to get an anonymous third-party administered survey, and it's going to say this person's goal. Let's say, for instance, somebody working it out, okay, that's been perceived as a toxic leader. His goal is to lead with trust and respect. That's what his goal is. Okay. Now, there's maybe some skepticism with the stakeholders, but we've been working at it. A mini survey will come out to those stakeholders, and they're going to be asked the following question: not how has he been over the last 10 years or whatever. It's his goal began on this date. It's now been X months. Over this period of time, what progress has she or he made toward that goal? And the stakeholders will answer that question numerically. If they put down a 0, means, well, he didn't get better, he didn't get worse. If they put down a +1, it means, she got better, there's still room to grow. A 2 means, wow, she's done, beyond expectations. And then 3, which is the top of the scale, is, oh my gosh, this person is the leader of this behavior in the entire organization. And it goes in reverse. -1, ooh, lost ground. -2, this is very scary. And -3, we got to run for the hills. And according to the Goldsmith research, a successful engagement achieves a net 1. So
in what time frame?
Well, sorry, what was that time frame?
In what time frame? Yeah.
It varies on the engagement. I've had it from 3 months, probably the shortest. 12 months, more at the other end, and points in between.
Yeah.
But usually you agree on that as part of the action plan. And the question really is, if this leader commits to this action plan, commits to this goal, and commits to the specific written behaviors that the person will be laid out and held accountable to and hold themselves accountable to, by when should that perception change? So if these 5 people perceive you, if I'm talking to my coachee, as a bully, as a source of fear and intimidation, if we follow this plan, by when, if it's successful, should that perception have changed? And I generally say, the most ambitious is 3 months. Can happen. But I also say we might do a survey at 3 months, and if there's still work to be done, clearly the effort's being made, we'll stay with it. If the perception hasn't changed after 6 months, then I've got real issues as to whether it's ever going to work. Either because the leader is not truly committed to behavioral change, or because the hole is just so deep it's impossible to climb out of. Although I'll say on that last one, that's an assumption a lot of people make, and it's almost always wrong. People like to root for a reform center. That's one of the things these toxic leaders have going for them. And there's like a little reservoir of potential goodness that can get tapped, even among people whose lives have been made miserable by that leader.
Yeah, I think a point to add to that, Jathan, is that with the stakeholder approach, the Marshall Goldsmith approach that you use, you're not just surveying the stakeholders after, say, 4 months or 5 months of coaching. That's not the only time that stakeholder is being asked for their feedback. They're being consulted every month by that leader, and that leader is saying, how am I doing? Please give me feedback. How am I doing? And so that demonstrates, A, that they care, and B, ideally that they're listening and they're doing something about it. So that helps, I believe, change perception as well. And that itself is a behavior change that the coachee is undergoing. And so it's not just a bunch of magic happening behind a closed door between coach and coachee and suddenly perceptions are going to change. No, that perception is being changed slowly over time through continuous communication and dialogue, correct?
Well, you're spot on. Absolutely. In fact, the point you make, I think, is so critical. This is what I do when I start an engagement. Okay, after I do the 360 assessment, we get together, we work out the goal, we work out the initial behavioral steps, we get the feed forward, all those different terms. Okay, we now have a written action plan. Then I say, okay, who are the stakeholders? I want their names specifically. Then I have, and people do it differently, and I do it differently sometimes, but here's the key. The leader goes to each of those stakeholders. My method is separate one-on-ones. Some people do it as a group, but it's each stakeholder is asked actually to participate and told that they will be checking in on a 30-day or approximately 30-day basis. Here's the thing. I say if we're going to work together, coachees, I say, I want to know the dates that you enrolled each of your stakeholders, and I want to know that you've marked your calendar, because I'm going to mark my calendar too. And approximately 30 days from now, I'm going to be asking you, have you had your stakeholder check-ins? And if you haven't, I'll be waiting to hear your explanation. So that's just to underscore how that is, that I'm not going to let them slide on that, because you're right. It is an indispensable element in success. They might get from a 0 to a 1 on their own, but if they're doing those check-ins, what behavior that would be measured as a 1 by that stakeholder is probably going to be measured as a 2 at least, because of the check-in process. Mm-hmm. So thank you for bringing that up. That is a fundamental point.
Yeah. Now, I think another significant advantage or benefit to stakeholder coaching, the Marshall Goldsmith model, and you glossed over it very quickly. You said, okay, you interview stakeholders, you come up with a behavior goal, and the example you gave is to treat people with trust and respect, I believe it was. And then you come up with an action plan. So tell me what might be included on an action plan. Describe that for people so they have a better understanding.
Okay, so it's, well, I'd have to make sure I took the names out. I could almost show you one. So instead I'll create a visual picture. So picture a document that has a date on it. Okay, that's the date as of which you commit to this plan. And then in the far left column, okay, the title is goal. That's the overall goal. Delegate more effectively. Lead with trust and respect. Handle confrontations constructively. Whatever it is, that's your goal. We don't leave it there. Then you move into the next column adjacent to it, which is where you're going to question yourself every day and mark yourself every day on, did I appropriately do the following? And these will be very specific, observable behaviors. An example might be, did I solicit others' opinions before expressing my own? That would be an example. Did I give positive recognition to someone for an action, idea, or contribution they made? Yes or no? Did you do it? And it could also be a referring. Did I confirm in a conversation, did I confirm with the person their view before expressing mine? So in other words, these are designed to be observable behaviors. Did you do it? Did you not do it? So that the leader can assess themselves, the coach can assess them. I'll sometimes be a fly on the wall, but also the stakeholders can. Because there's also this, people have blind spots. We all do. I talk about three realities. There's the reality of what we perceive we do. There's the reality of what we do. They're often different. And I have brought wry smiles to lots of clients where, so, well, what did you just do? And I say, well, let me tell you exactly, because I was there. Or even, I recorded it. And they're, really? Ha! So you have a gap often between what you perceive you do and what you do. There's a third one, which is what they perceive, which can also vary from what actually you did and what you perceived you did. And so the coaching engagement is, if it's successful, collapses those three realities. And so those are the things we work at. And going back to what you said, a lot of these difficult people are result-oriented and they're driven. And that's a new game. Can we collapse the three realities? You think you think you behave in a way that's wonderful. You behave in a way that's iffy. That's the reality. And they perceive you as being a total, lost cause jerk. Can we bring those together? Maybe closer to what you perceive. So we now have a goal and then we have a game plan. And that's your action.
Yeah. And I think that succinctness of it is very attractive for someone who is results oriented, driven. It's not just airy fairy foofy stuff like, okay, how am I supposed to change my behavior? I don't even know what I'm supposed to do differently. This gives you a very clear roadmap of what you could be doing differently.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the Marshall Goldsmith model fits perfectly for these kinds of very challenging behavior changes. So I think what if I can kind of summarize or bring back our whole conversation sort of full circle, like the original people who come to us, they have challenging leaders. I think you have a very unique skill set, having been a lawyer. You've dealt with many challenging individuals, but ultimately it's not like I think you do have a unique perspective, but you're really facilitating change through the model of stakeholder coaching. So it's a process that's proven, that's been used thousands of times, and it's your guide. That's the thing that's helping you really produce the change within individuals. Is that fair to say, Jathan? I don't want to take away from your unique talents and skills as a coach. That framework really helps.
Well, I think what it was, I've been doing this work in this space as a coach and then also as an organization development consultant, because I also work with organizations too, where the organization is the client as opposed to the specific person I'm coaching. What Marshall Goldsmith, Stakeholder Centered Coaching did for me was it gave me the perfect vehicle for what I was doing. So whatever success level I was achieving before, core principles of stakeholder centered coaching just moved it up. It's like like a baseball player, and you discover a new posture at the plate. And all of a sudden your averages and your slugging percentage and things just start to change. And by the way, I'll say also, not just when I'm doing a one-on-one coaching, I incorporate Goldsmith principles in all the work I do. All the work I do. I work with HR on converting HR from compliance cop to culture coach. Goldsmith principles are built into that work. I work with C-suites on creating great workplace cultures. Goldsmith principles are built into that work. So it has done, I mean, it was for me professionally, the rocket fuel.
Yeah. And for us as an organization, because we pride ourselves on always making the right connection between issue or problem that the organization is facing and the right coaching solution. And we draw from a large pool of coaches. We have many coaches with different training and specializations. And we found the exact same thing. We were employing coaches to deal with toxic or abrasive leaders, and the Marshall Goldsmith process seems to just fit it hand to glove. It's just a great we found that leveling up with our clients as well. And so we put a lot of faith into it, a lot of trust into it. You still have to have the right coach, because in my experience, again, like I said earlier at the beginning of this call, we've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of coaches, literally, and I would say most of them wouldn't touch any of the most challenging cases that we face with a 100-foot pole. Whereas Jathan, you go in there just ready to go, ready to rock, and you embrace it.
Well, this is probably sounds strange, and maybe it suggests that I'm strange, and I'm sure my wife would agree. Sometimes like a big super ego whatever leader, often I've been brought in after they intimidated the coach that they had. And so they basically manipulated the whole coaching relationship into coaching their narrative. And that's their way. They subdue. And occasionally that's tried on me. And I just find it amusing. I just find, okay, so you're going to intimidate me. Have at it. So that also could be why, sort of like coach of the last resort. Because, really? Okay. Do you know how many people like you I cross-examined? Including the ones that ended up bankrupt. But go ahead. Intimidate me.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry for that excursion, but it is true. It's like, in fact, by now they usually know about me enough that they don't even try. But there was a transitional period, and I always just sort of found it amusing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not to say you don't see the possibilities in them, right? Like, you're not seeing them as a villain, a bad guy or gal, because I think there's almost an equal number of women and men leaders who are abrasive and toxic. Maybe you have different data than us, but that's definitely what we see.
Oh, I've certainly encountered and dealt with women that were abrasive and intimidating and fear creating, and also that had developed what they thought were necessary. Go back to Mama Grizzly. So even when I've started an engagement with somebody that I thought was trying to manipulate or intimidate me, I didn't walk away. I just called it. And I said, and my sense is you're not reserving this behavior for me, that this is a right, wrong, or indifferent, a kind of coping strategy that you've developed. where you're in an uncertain situation and you want to control as many of the variables you can control. And those include the human beings that are around you. So you're nervous about this coaching engagement and where it might lead. So your default response is to control the coach through whatever means necessary. Fear, intimidation, deceit, manipulation. You want to control it. So if we're going to work well together, if we're successful, you're going to learn there are other and better ways. Okay. That in fact, if instead of producing certain behaviors from me that you want because I'm afraid or I'm intimidated or I'm deceived, what if you got my genuine desire to help you succeed? What if you commanded not just what you can command, like to show up at work on time? What if you got that discretionary energy you can't command? What if when I'm not around you, I'm thinking about ways to help you be successful? What do you think? Now, if I'm afraid of you, am I going to think that? Am I going to be worrying about that? If I see you headed in a path that's going to be bad for you, am I going to call that out? But what if I genuinely care about you and feel you care about me? What changes happen and what results happen? So I never go into engagement saying, there's no way. And even if they misbehave early on in the process, I don't immediately pull the plug. I'll call it. And if necessary, I'll pull the plug. But we'll just have it before then, we're going to have a candid conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. So for an individual who has a toxic leadership issue in their organization, they're looking for coaching. They're not even sure coaching is going to work. What are your final thoughts? Any last pieces of advice?
Yes, it would be this. Let's say I'm the client. Let's say I'm the owner. I'm the the CEO or the whatever. And let's say you are the prospective coach. In addition to getting a sense of your abilities and your experience, and in addition to having confidence in you as a professional coach, there's one thing I want to know from you, which is, if there's a point where this coaching engagement is futile or even potentially counterproductive, even if it's not in your economic interest to end it, you will come to me and you'll talk to me. And you'll say, you know what, Jathan, I think we need to maybe pull the plug on this. I want to know that if in your mind and your heart that you say, you know what, this is not healthy and it's not going in a healthy way. And even though I was engaged for 12 months or whatever it is, I think we need to revisit it. I just want to know that you'll do that. That's
really good.
That would be a conversation as the person who's potentially footing the bill and responsible overall, the sponsor as it's called. I'd want to know that in the coach. One way is to put that on the table and say, what happens? And so, because that's something I put in because I want the ability to leave. Okay. I want the ability to pull the plug. And the fact that it costs me money, so what in the long term? And so that's something that I want reciprocally. I think sometimes, unfortunately, if you don't have that conversation, there isn't that clarity. The coach will continue after a point where a much stronger intervention needs to happen.
Yeah, great point. And great way to end. Jathan, thank you for your time. Thank you for all your input and your stories. This has been really helpful. And if you're interested in getting some coaching for anybody in your organization, give Noomii a call. We can put the right coach on the job. And if this leader that you have is one of the most challenging ones there is, Jathan's your man. So thank you, everyone.